What agents really wanted was for Russell Barnes to give a statement about drug boss Ken Jones and enforcer Jeffrey Barnes committing murder.
You ready?
When details of the drug deal were on tape, investigators moved in.
Get on your ground. On the floor now. Put your hands behind your head. Okay, we're clear.
They had indisputable evidence of Russell Barnes selling roughly 2 ounces of cocaine.
On your knees.
Investigators explained to him that as a 3-time narcotics offender, Russell was looking at a minimum of 15 years in prison. They wanted a statement about his uncle.
Right, Barnes.
We sat him down and we talked at some length about Jeffrey Barnes and his involvement with the Dewan Walker homicide. Being somewhat reluctant because this was his uncle, it took some persuasion, and after a while we gained his confidence, and he eventually told us his knowledge about the Dewan Walker homicide.
What happened with Walker? Walker.
Jeffrey Barnes had told him Walker tried to steal cocaine from Ken Jones.
Took my gun, put it to his
So they
head.
killed him.
Pow!
The enforcer said they then dumped Walker's body in an alley, doused it with gasoline, and lit it afire.
Nobody messes with my money.
It was, at best, a second-hand confession.
Nobody messes with my drug operation. And
Russell
also
Barnes was taken into
murder that
custody.
boy, Dewan Walker.
All right, let's go. Stand up.
Agents also arrested their informant, so no one would know he cooperated.
Discovered a 22 caliber.
Sounds like the one I'm working on. Record.
Drug boss Ken Jones was still on the street,
Yes.
as was his enforcer, Jeffrey Barnes.
Just pop 'em.
But the FBI task force was closing in.
Nothing to it.
Get on your ground.
By 1994, while trying to dismantle a Minnesota drug ring and solve a 4-year-old murder, the FBI and St. Paul police had arrested dealer Russell Barnes, who agreed to cooperate. He offered details on the crimes committed by his uncle Jeffrey Barnes, including nationwide drug trafficking and the 1990 murder of Dewan Walker. According to Sergeant Tom Donaski, investigators had plenty of evidence against Jeffrey Barnes, a known enforcer for drug boss Ken Jones.
We've got a weapon that's been recovered at the airport. We've got Jeff Barnes making a comment to one of our informants that this is how you murder somebody. That's a dope ripoff type of situation. And the actual procedure that he went through when he killed Dewan Walker, and now we have his nephew telling us that he's been at his house, blood relative, that we're going to have testify in court that he actually told him about the murder.
In August 1994, investigators staked out the apartment where Jeffrey Barnes was staying. They knew the enforcer was often armed and willing to kill. He had no time to react.
Freeze! Please don't! Put your hands up on the car. Come on, move! Move! Put your hands
Prosecutors did not yet charge him with murder.
Got it?
They went forward with a drug conspiracy case instead.
You have your other hand. Right.
Dealing drugs to his ex-cellmate earned Barnes 30 years in prison. They would hold the murder case until they had more evidence against him and Ken Jones. Special Agent Grant Beasy believed having Barnes in prison would make witnesses more willing to talk.
Jeff Barnes had the reputation of being an enforcer. He scared people. We felt that getting him off the street would take away the intimidation factor against some of these other people. And it would be better for us to be able to talk to these other folks with him being locked up.
The plan worked. After Barnes's arrest, investigators met with an associate of Ken Jones. Facing a long prison term on drug charges, He offered to be a government witness. He said he had extensive knowledge about Jones's drug cartel and that he had met Duane Walker just before his murder. In mid-June 1990, Jones had ordered the cooperating witness to drive a pickup truck to St. Louis, where he was to meet Walker. The truck had been fitted with a second fuel tank. Upon arrival in St. Louis, Duane Walker stuffed several bags of cocaine into the false tank. When full, the tank held about 30 kilos of the drug. That amount of cocaine would have been worth more than $1 million. The cooperating witness then drove the truck back to St. Paul, where he turned it over to the drug boss. Walker had arrived earlier and was staying with Jones at his condominium. Jones hadn't paid Walker for the drugs yet. In fact, he and his enforcer decided not to.
The two of them conspire to take the dope and to eliminate the problem and just execute Duane Walker.
That's Bo.
The witness's testimony would explain the motive for the killing. He told the agents that several days later he got a call from the drug boss. He was ordered to come over to the condo immediately. It was Sunday morning, June 24th, 1990, the day following Duane Walker's murder. Ken Jones seemed very nervous. He ordered the cooperating witness to get rid of the truck he had driven up from St. Louis, the one with the false gas tank. The drug boss demanded that no one be told about the cocaine run. The witness said Jones's girlfriend had also told him about cleaning up blood in the bathroom after the murder.
This picture, you recognize this chick. Do you swear to tell the truth?
In the summer of 1995, prosecutors convened a grand jury to secure witness testimony under oath. Jones's girlfriend was subpoenaed to testify.
That would be Irene, the sister of Charles.
But she denied telling anyone that she cleaned up blood in Jones's
I'm not sure what
bathroom.
you're talking about. I never cleaned up any blood.
The Ken Jones.
If authorities couldn't prove she was lying, they might never be able to indict Ken Jones and Jeffrey Barnes for murder.
No, sir.
What if you would tell us, please, about the evening?
In June 1995, grand jury testimony from others proved that one witness perjured herself when she denied cleaning up blood in the bathroom of drug boss Ken Jones.
Ken Jones, did you not?
I'm not sure what you're talking about, sir.
On June 21st, the grand jury indicted Jones and his main enforcer Jeffrey Barnes for the 1990 murder of Duane Walker. Barnes, the alleged hitman, was already in prison on drug charges. The day after the indictment, investigators staked out the home of drug boss Ken Jones. Although he had insulated himself well against the investigation, Ken Jones was finally arrested for murder.
Cover.
FBI Drug Task Force member Sergeant Tom Danaski was determined to find physical evidence to back up witness testimony at the trial.
Through the investigation, everything focused on the fact that Duane Walker was murdered in the bathroom, and he was shot in the head there. I was thinking that we might be able to still find a trace of blood in the grouting on the floor in the bathroom.
Bureau of Criminal Apprehension technicians processed the bathroom. After Jones was arrested, new tenants had moved into the condo. They gave their consent for the search. The technicians tested for the presence of blood using luminol, a relatively new technique at the time. Luminol reacts with proteins in blood rendering minute traces of it visible under ultraviolet light.
We were able to determine on the underlayment underneath the tile that there was a significant amount of blood. They were unable to obtain a DNA off that test, but they were able to obtain a test that showed that it was a significant amount of blood, and it was human blood that was still traceable back even 5 years.
Mr. Barnes and Mr. Jones
It was the evidence investigators needed.
are, in fact, the head of a
On
larger
October 31st,
organization
1995,
bringing in
Ken Jones and Jeffrey Barnes went to trial in St. Paul.
every year, but also for the murder of Duane.
Prosecutors outlined what they believed occurred in Duane Walker's final
These two
hours.
gentlemen here are responsible for all of this.
Walker had delivered roughly 30 kilos of cocaine to Jones. The drug boss decided he didn't want to pay. That night, he and his main enforcer, Jeffrey Barnes, partied with Walker. Eventually, Walker headed into the bathroom. Jones and Barnes had planned the hit to take place there. Duane Walker was unarmed. Barnes fired 3 shots from his .22 caliber Derringer. As always, Jones maintained his distance. Walker died immediately. Later that night, they wrapped Walker's body in plastic sheets to contain the blood and loaded it into a car. They drove to an alley and dumped the body. To make identification more difficult, they doused the body with gasoline and set it ablaze. Jones used his girlfriend to cover his tracks after the murder. The bathroom floor was covered with blood, particularly the area around the tub where Walker had fallen. She was able to clean the surface, but blood had seeped down into the subflooring. 5 years later, technicians would find it there.
You will come away with the inescapable conclusion.
Ken Jones and Jeffrey Barnes were convicted of murder and drug charges.
Responsible for this murder. There has been
In
no
March
evidence
1996, they were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of
the
parole.
associations of these gentlemen through the years.
Jeffrey Barnes, who had once boasted he was Murder Incorporated, was no longer a threat to those outside the prison system. Ken Jones had tried to create an image of himself as a community leader. But his greed led to murder, and he will never leave prison alive.